Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Really interesting story on the Bloomberg today about Republicans turning against vaccines. Why they're doing it's a Bloomberg opinion piece.
It is by Jonathan Bernstein, and he writes, why are some Republican politicians suddenly turning against the vaccine, and at least in one case, seemingly turning against vaccination in general? He explores it in the piece, and we're going to explore it now.
Maybe a thought that didn't cross your mind yet. We'll get to that in just a moment. First up,
All right, folks, welcome back. This is the Marketplace Reset Show and Jumpstart. I'm Anthony Weeks. Thank you for joining the program this afternoon. Reporting, we are broadcasting live on WSEX Radio. We are a Bloomberg Radio affiliate. We're also broadcasting on Tempo Television. We're also broadcasting on our Hispanic Latin station, La Mega Mundial. We're also broadcasting on Caribbean American Passport, a public publication in the state of Florida. Thank you so much. And we are also broadcasting on social media and online. You can check us out at www.jumpstarteconomy.us. Again, that's www.jumpstarteconomy.us. Now, this is our third segment of the program, and this segment focuses on technology and e-commerce, better known as Tech Talk. Now, today's program, we're going to have a very specific take a look at the issue of the semiconductor chip. Why this is important, you got to really listen up, because it is really what's reaping havoc across the global supply chain. Whether you've given it any thought, realize it or not, the semiconductor chip plays such a vital, crucial, critical role in the supply chain globally. And a lot of industries, a lot of the things that you take for granted, that you use on a daily basis, things that you just from a consumption point of view as a consumer, today we're going to take a look at that. And the reason for that is because there are three parts to why this is important. Let me first say that today, my second article is going to be published today on what is labeled as the U.S.-Taiwan education exchange value proposition. The reason that's as important is because if you notice, well, I'll share with you, and I'm not going to give you all the details of the article because you'll have an opportunity to read the article today, which will be published on the Virgin Islands Consortium. You're able to go online and read it for yourself. But in my position where I am responsible for, I am the special economic envoy to Taiwan and the Asian Pacific region, and my responsibility is to look at ways we can build a bridge between let me say, put it this way. to be able to enhance and expand economic development opportunities for between the United States and Taiwan. The United States is a major partner, or Taiwan is a major trade partner with the United States, and these two, if you will, markets are very reliant on each other, more so than you can imagine. And so I'm going to address the education front and why that's important. Then I'm going to address the issue of semiconductor, period, the chip that, without this chip, a lot of the things when I share with you, you'll understand they just wouldn't exist, or they can't function. And then, of course, the relationship between ourselves and Taiwan. When I say ourselves, the U.S., but specifically as it relates to the U.S. Virgin Islands and Taiwan. Why is that important? It's important because what we are experiencing right now on St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands, a major engine of the private sector that is impactful to the U.S. Virgin Islands Treasury, but more so to the U.S. to St. Croix as a local market. The refinery has shut down, and they just recently announced that they will be filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And so what started out as a major where they spent over $2 billion to refurbish the infrastructure at the refinery. They spent $2.5 billion at least to refurbish the refinery. No sooner, let's say a month in, when they turned on the lights to restart the refinery, two things happened. There was an incident where that took place at the refinery that created an environmental problem for the residents of St. Croix. The EPA obviously came down on the refinery, and shortly after that, the refinery basically said they're going to suspend operation, and then shortly after that, they said, as of yesterday, they said they're going to file for Chapter 11 to reorganize. Okay, and hopefully, it means one or two things: that they're able to reorganize and raise more capital to restart, or they may end up having to sell the asset through liquidation and sell the asset to somebody else. Why is that important? Because it just simply means the largest private sector employer in the United States Virgin Islands, but particularly on the island of St. Croix, is shuttered. They have suspended operation. They've temporarily stopped the restart of the refinery, and they're trying to reorganize. And, hundreds of jobs, folks are going to be displaced. Jobs are going to be lost. Local businesses that service that refinery is going to be severely impacted. And so we're going to see different segment and sectors that are going to be, you're going to see the domino effect economically within the economy. What does all this mean? It means that we need the government of the Virgin Islands, working in partnership with the private sector, this is not an if, diversify the U.S. Virgin Islands economy, particularly on the island of St. Croix, because the largest private sector contributor for the Virgin Islands economy is tourism, about 60%. And on the private sector side, particularly St. Croix, which is industrial, is the refinery. And so therefore, the loss of the refinery is now put the, if you will, the strain on the tourism industry to be able to carry the U.S. Virgin Islands economy. And that just doesn't work. So the real opportunity is, or the question is, where is that opportunity? And so on this program, you will hear me talk about on two fronts. We have to first, if we're going to make ourselves attractive as a destination, as a jurisdiction for a place to do business, we need to be able to have a workforce that is educated, trained, and developed to be able to attract the industries that we believe that we can attract to the United States Virgin Islands economy, but particularly for the island of St. Croix. My organization, the St. Croix Economic Development Initiative Organization, acronym SETI, one of our initiatives is called the Caribbean America's Single Economy. This was created to be able to, as a private sector project initiative, to be able to partner with the public sector. But whether it's in the U.S. Virgin Islands or on the U.S. mainland, state level, or as well as federal level, that we are able to work with our partners in the Caribbean. CARICOM, as you may know, introduced back in 1989, the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, where they're looking to for the free movement of people to better integrate the free movement of people and the economy within the Caribbean. That is something CARICOM, the Caribbean community, is they're spearheading that initiative. And so what this does, this initiative called CASE, the Caribbean America's Single Economy Initiative, which is a private sector-led initiative, but working with our public sector partner to look at ways where we can provide a parallel strategic approach to working in the region with the likes of CARICOM and their proposed Caribbean Single Market and Economy. So CASE, as well as the CSME, are basically, there are synergies for us to do that. Why is that important? Because back in 2016, the federal government passed a law that says that the federal government's commitment, legislatively, policy-wise, to the Caribbean is called the U.S. Strategy Engagement in the Caribbean. So those laws that exist, that speaks to what priorities that the federal government, the U.S. federal government, is going to execute and employ to be able to work closely with the Caribbean. Now, tomorrow on the program, on the Case Report and News, I will get into specifically in terms of what's happening with Cuba and what's happening with Haiti and the consequences of those events taking place, and what does that mean in terms of the region. But for today's purpose, we're going to take a look at the role of the semiconductor industry, semiconductor chip. Where is the U.S. in terms of its market share, and the trade relationship between the United States and Taiwan, but specifically, what does that mean for the U.S. Virgin Islands in terms of an opportunity to look at where within that supply chain can we develop opportunity to be able to create somewhere in that supply chain an opportunity to diversify and connect the U.S. Virgin Islands to that ecosystem. And so I want to be able to share that with you. I want to say hi to my colleague, Michael Gerard. Michael, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. How about you? I love everything that you're talking about today, man. This is it's sad, but it does show us that we need to diversify, right? We put a lot of our eggs in one basket. So really, really happy to get started on this conversation about semiconductors.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for that, because obviously you are one of the best and brightest in terms of the talent. When we talked earlier, you heard me made reference to what kind of labor pool, what kind of workforce pool we have to make the opportunity to be able to either attract industries or to create industries internally, and how we afford opportunities to create new businesses, which in turn can create new jobs. You are in the tech space. You're one of the talented U.S. Virgin Islanders that are creating a startup, a tech startup, to be able to look at ways we can develop our tech industry to position the U.S. Virgin Islands as a tech hub. And I want to thank you for the work you do and your organization, and speak to how do we build on that? What are the building blocks to be able to work with the likes of you as an entrepreneur, as a Virgin Islander, and the area of fintech,
right,
and which stands for financial and technology to be able to better provide that sort of application to help consumers in the United States Virgin Islands and anywhere anyone can download that app. So I want to thank you for that as well. But most important, you were on the first delegation. You were part last week. We talked. We commemorated the 4 years that we have been traveling to Taiwan. We also, talked about, we did a review as to what occurred, and you were part of the 20-member delegation that went on the first U.S. Virgin Islands delegation to Taiwan. And so it's so important that you had a front row seat as to what took place in Taiwan, and to be able to see the potential and what we can do, especially when we've been really focusing on what we call smart city technology, or Internet of Things technology, and how we can better improve our infrastructure. As we talked about, the president talks about rebuilding our infrastructure, but how do we build a more resilient, smarter, more effective way of connecting and building out our infrastructure? And you were there with us when we made that first delegation trip, and so I'm looking forward to being able to have that conversation with you in the program today. All right, now I want to pull up the chart. The chart basically takes a look at the, if you will, the semiconductor and the race between the United States and China innovation race itself, and kind of run through this a little bit as well. I'm going to also share some, as a Bloomberg Radio affiliate, we're going to share some information, some reports from Bloomberg on their interviews and reporting on the semiconductor and those experts and companies in that space. But let's take a look at, for those who are listening to us on radio, obviously you can't see it. If you would like to see it, please go to what we're sharing with you. Go to www.jumpstarteconomy.us. Again, that's www.jumpstarteconomy.us, and you'll be able to check it out. But if you're watching on television, please pay attention to what we're sharing with you. And so this was a special report prepared by FB Analytics, and it talks a little bit about the semiconductor chip and the current semiconductor shortage as well. So what a difference 2 months can make. In May, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the world's largest chip maker, lost the business of, I believe it's pronounced, I think it's Huawei Technology. Huawei Technology. Huawei Technologies, its biggest Chinese customer and the source of 13% of its revenue, as a casualty of geopolitical jockeying between the superpowers. But TSMC shareholders took the loss in stride, and by late July, after it stumbled by rival Intel, TSMC stock had risen almost 50% since May, making it one of the world's 10 most valuable companies. And when you look at the pretty much the role of TSMC, their prowess has elevated over the years, and they have, in terms of, they're at number 362 on the Global 500 with $35 billion in revenue. Today, it gets 60% of sales from the U.S. and about 20% from mainland China. When we look at the space of semiconductor, the industry annual semiconductor sales revenue has since grown to over $480 billion as of 2018. The semiconductor industry is in turn the driving force behind the wider electronic industry, with annual power electronic sales of 135 billion pounds, which is equivalent to $216 billion as of 2011. Annual consumer electronic sales expected to reach $2.9 trillion, by which they reached in last year by 2020. Tech industry sales expected to reach $5 trillion, which is a year before that in 2019, and e-commerce with over $29 trillion in 2017. The summary: semiconductors are the best performing industry over the past 5 years. Also, the semiconductor industry has traditionally been highly cyclical, but it's now moving towards a new model that is more closely tied to the health of the global economy. And third, the industry is evolving to more of a portfolio model, selling chips into many different products, spreading returns across a greater number of assets. Taking a look at this chart, when you look at the 2019 demand by end use, you have end use category, you have communication, you have computers, you have consumer products, you have automotive, you have industrial, and you have government. Annual, you have communication minus 10.5%. You have computer annual growth minus 18.7%. You have consumer, you have a minus of 5.2%. Then you have, I believe, automotive, you have 6.9%. Then you have industrial 13%, and government 13%. You have total value at $136 billion in terms of communication, $117.3 billion in terms of computer, $54.7 billion in terms of consumer products, $50.2 billion in terms of automotive, and $48.9 billion industrial, and $5.2 billion. All right. Then you have taken a look at the countries. This pie gives you an idea of how large of a role of a pie that the U.S. represent. The U.S. Is the number one industry or market, has the largest share of the market at 50%. Second largest is Korea, 17%. Japan is at 11%. Europe is at 9%. The chart on the right kind of give you a sense between, how between the United States, Taiwan, and China, how the ecosystem is flowing in terms of percentage between those different markets in terms of the semiconductor. You have semiconductor demand by end market is in 2020. You have in the 34% bracket, you have computing. You have in the wireless communication bracket, you have 30%. In the consumer bracket, you have 14%. In autos, cars, you have 8%. You have industrial, you have 8%. You have 5% in wired communication, and military and aerospace, you have 1%. Now, you heard me talk about smart city. One of the things that each year when we go, one of the trips I make with the delegation is we attend the annual Smart City, the Taipei Smart City Summit. And so we go there to look at exploring ways we can look at innovative technology in terms of how smart city technology is applicable to our infrastructure and other areas within in terms of our ecosystem. And so you see here the role semiconductor memory plays. You starting with artificial intelligence, smart city, digital fitness, smart TV, smart speaker, game console, computing, servers, mobile devices, big data, Internet of Things, 5G technology, automotive, and you have audio and I believe video, visual technology. And so when you also look at the largest semiconductor companies by revenue, you have the largest company that controls 44.8% of the market, Samsung. Samsung is a South Korea company. Then the second largest is Intel, obviously a US-based company. And then you have the third largest is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They control 7.5%. And then you have, you have SK Hynix. They control 70.6%.
Also South Korean.
Also South Korean, yes. And TSMC is at 7.5%. Micron Technology at 6.2%. Qualcomm at 5.2%. Broadcom is at 4.5%. Texas Instrument at 3.1%. Toshiba at 2.6%. And NVIDIA at
NVIDIA.
2.5%.
I was actually surprised that there was that many U.S.-based companies that are in the business of semiconducting.
Well, this next chart I don't have the chart yet. So there's a chart that kind of gives you a breakdown of all the U.S. companies. This chart, the other chart didn't. But there are a lot of companies in the U.S. But clearly, Samsung is the largest, in terms of their share of the semiconductor chip as well. But in terms of foundry, a chip foundry market share as of 2020 second quarter, as you can see, Taiwan dominated the chip foundry market. They're the largest semiconductor foundry in the world at 51.5%. Then you have Samsung at 18% from South Korea. Then you have others, but then you have another company called UMC out of Taiwan at 7.3%. But then you have Global Foundries, which is in the U.S. At 7.4%, which kind of gives you a sense of the chart. Anything that you want to add to that, Michael?
No, I mean, what this really shows is that even though the U.S. has a pretty large share of companies that sell semiconductors, a lot of it is really made in Taiwan. We compare this chart to the last one.
Absolutely. What I'd like to do is I'd like to bring up a couple of reports, and based on we can offer some commentaries after each report we share, and then we'll continue on the program as we continue to look at the data. Let's go straight to the issue of the global shortage in terms of semiconductor.
Semiconductors, or chips, are essential components in things we use every day. They're made from the material that gave Silicon Valley its name, and they handle everything from artificial intelligence processing to simple functions like translating the press of a button into an electronic signal. Think of them as the brain of a device. So what happened? When the pandemic shut down car factories in March, automakers expected less orders for passenger vehicles, so in turn cut their orders for chips. At the same time, working from home and 5G drove demand for laptops, smartphones, cloud services and data centers, so those industries increased their orders for semiconductors. That caused chip makers to switch production to those areas rather than pile up chips they couldn't sell. But what both car and computer companies didn't expect was a quick rebound in demand for their products. So here lies the problem. There's now not enough supply to meet demand, and building chip factories takes years and costs billions of dollars.
The answer in the near term is nothing can be done in a grand way that can infuse supply. Supply expansion takes time, takes addition of new factories, addition of new capacity.
How bad could it get? Chip shortages are expected to wipe out $61 billion of sales for automakers alone. And big chip makers like Qualcomm, NXP and Infineon say the auto industry isn't the only sector to get hurt. Games console makers say things will get worse before they get better, potentially impacting holiday sales. President Biden has signed an executive order to look into why the US is so reliant on overseas chip manufacturers like Taiwan's TSMC and South Korea's Samsung.
Companies such as Qualcomm, AMD, NVIDIA, all of these companies don't have factories of their own and rely on third-party manufacturers, and over the last decade or so have become extremely reliant on TSMC.
So how long before supply meets up with demand? Well, it's a guessing game, but some analysts say we won't see signs of a turnaround until the second half of the year. Ed Ludlow, Bloomberg News, San Francisco.
So, Michael, based on what was reported, what's your thoughts on what they said?
Man, well, I mean, I think we're feeling it right now, right? So just look at what happened to us in the USVI. There was an uptick of tourism, and we didn't expect it. There wasn't enough rental cars in the entire USVI. We had people in the private, well, I wouldn't even say private sector. I would say private people, individuals renting their cars, right? I saw taxi people renting their taxis because there just wasn't enough cars available for rent. I can only imagine that on a large scale. There's a good example of that in Alaska, right? The northern western part of America. People just, there was an extremely high demand on buying vehicles, but also renting them. And the manufacturers weren't able to supply the renters. So, it just goes to show that, one, based on the Biden laws assigned, we should have been cognizant of this beforehand and not really rely on one source. So now we're in this weird place where we don't have enough chips for the cars because they're not manufactured. But now, because of the shift, there isn't going to be enough with electronics. And the holiday season is just a turn away.
Mm-hmm. I like that point you made on the cars, because for example, speaking on the automotive side, let's take a look at the chart to see just how impactful the semiconductor chip has been to the automotive industry in the United States. So let's take a look at this chart right here. This chart will give you a sense of just exactly what that looks like. You have the U.S. itself. Let's just let me see if I can expand this. Maybe I can't, but it says the U.S. car models worst hit by the microchip shortage. Estimated number of vehicles taken out of production due to microchip shortage as of May 2021. Hardest hit was the Ford F-Series, 109,710 of these Fords of F-Series was taken out of production. The Jeep Cherokee, 998,584 was taken out of production. Chevrolet Equinox, 81,833 were taken out of production. The Chevrolet Malibu, 56,929 was taken out of production because of the shortage. Ford Explorer, 46,766 were taken out of production. Jeep Compass, 42,195 were taken out of production. The Ford Edge, 37,521 was taken out of production. And the Ford Escape, 36,463 were taken out of production. This was this data chart was by Statista in terms of the data that we have here. And so, to your point, when you talk about those industries or the automotive industry and how impactful it was to the car industry, rental car companies, auto dealership, that's the reason why you saw that shortage. Cars were not available because production had stopped in those different U.S. car manufacturer, and so therefore, the dealership didn't have any cars, and therefore the dealership couldn't supply the rental companies with cars. So it was that triple domino effect, like you said, right?
Yeah. I mean, and it even affected Uber. There was a small report that I read on it too. People that kind of buy new cars every year to keep their listing higher on Uber because it increases their profit. Right? They weren't able to get cars. So it's very interesting to me, but also I'm not shocked that the F-Series was there. That's the #1 selling vehicle in America. So Americans love their trucks. And, this really has to do back to what we spoke about in our first trip to Taiwan, right? In the Internet of Things. It's very important, more important than ever. And I think the pandemic really showed us that technology is the way forward. Everything is going to be controlled via some type of semiconductor in some way, shape, or form. So what is important to note is if we pay attention to that industry, maybe that's something that, it's a way or an avenue just from a geographic perspective, where we can tie the pieces between Taiwan and the US, or just the US supply in some way. So, it's just interesting that technology really boils down to the fundamentals, right?
Absolutely.
It's not what you see on the screen. It's what's going on behind it.
Let's take a look at the foreign market in terms of automotive in itself as we relate to automotive. Leading auto and truck manufacturer worldwide in 2019 based on sales revenue. The highest ranking in terms of leading auto and truck manufacturer worldwide. Basically, you had companies like Toyota Motors at $280 billion. You had Volkswagen at $275 billion. You had Daimler at $189.2 billion. Ford Motor at $149.9 billion. Honda Motors at $142.4 billion. You had General Motors at $137.2 billion. You have CAIC Motors, that's a company out of China, at $121.2 billion. You had Fiat Chrysler Automobiles at $21.1 billion, even with the CAIC, which is interesting because China is really not a major car player in the car industry, but they're right up there with Fiat Chrysler Automobiles.
Well, they have a large population.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Good point, right? BMW Group at $116.6 billion. Nissan Motors at $96 billion, just to kind of give you a sense of how large the automobile industry and the players as well. What I'd like to do is if you don't have a comment, I'd like to go to the next, if you will, report that talks about what's happening in the semiconductor space.
The world's manufacturing supply chains are showing signs of strain, and semiconductors, or chips, are among the hardest hit. The combination of the pandemic, policy decisions, and the growing demand for electric vehicles created a perfect storm for the industry.
This is an industry issue. Of course, we're working every single day with a cross-functional team to look for opportunities of how do we minimize the impact.
In January, Honda said it will cut domestic output at one of its Japanese factories, while Nissan is adjusting production of its Note hatchback model. GM announced this week that it's extending temporary shutdowns at 3 of its North American plants because of the ongoing semiconductor shortage.
The first quarter, we have had some disruptions and idled some of our plants, but it is still a volatile situation.
It's not just car makers. A shortage of chips affects everything from 5G phones to medical devices.
A combination of the coronavirus and the impact on, not to be too technical, the entity list, but the ability of American companies to sell to us and others, it's really had a very negative effect on us.
The shortage has gotten so bad that President Biden stepped in this week with an executive order directing a government-wide supply chain review for critical goods.
We need to make sure these supply chains are secure and reliable. I'm directing senior officials in my administration to work with industrial leaders to identify solutions to this semiconductor shortfall.
The problem has been brewing since 2019, and President Donald Trump's trade war with China also played a part in the supply crunch. Roughly 10% of the world's chip production comes from SMIC, a semiconductor company that's partially owned by the Chinese government. In 2020, the U.S. restricted American companies from selling to SMIC.
So by dealing with the availability of high tech, particularly semiconductors, to Huawei and to ZTE, we've slowed that down.
It's interesting to see the difference in terms of policy, right? In terms of how each administration approaches, the U.S. position around the world, and so recently the Congress basically, based on the threat of China or the innovative race, right? Innovation race between the number one largest economy in the world, the United States, and the second largest economy in the world, which is China. And so the two are literally racing to determine who is going to be the leader, if you will, in their respective space. And so Congress, there was strong bipartisan support between Congress and within Congress to be able to say the Senate and the Congress both agreed, which is rare. You don't often hear strong bipartisan between the Democrats and the Republicans. But as it relates to the issue with, how do we position the United States to stay ahead and to lead in that space, clearly this is where, we saw the U.S. stepping up to be able to say, in order to do this, we have to really make that investment, because they're saying that the federal government have not really been very proactive, have been very aggressive in putting the kind of dollars into science and innovation. And so therefore, if they're going to maintain their lead, because China is knocking on the door, they know that they have to be able to make that necessary investment. And so that $250 billion represent the funds going forward on that. What do you think? What do you say?
No, I agree. I think the U.S. is starting to wake up now to the fact that what made the U.S., grow to this, superpower, they've kind of been letting it go over the years, over the decades. And now this is, the pandemic, recent events with Egypt and the ship getting stuck for a few weeks. All of that is just, a storm that's letting us know that, we need to take some of that back home. The approaches of it is what I'm really interested in, because China has the manpower, right? They have the cheap labor costs versus the U.S. doesn't really have that. So I'm interested to see how much the U.S. is going to use robotics and other technologies to kind of substitute some of the manpower with their manufacturing.
Right. And that's a good point, because this bill at $250 billion of funding was specifically designed to compete directly with China. So that's a good point that you raised. Let's go to the final report, Bloomberg report, and this is speaking to an analyst from Taiwan, speaking about the issue of the shortage globally, but obviously Taiwan being the largest chip foundry in the world, obviously they're a major player in the scheme of things. And so this is the report from Bloomberg regarding that interview with Taiwan.
It's interesting to note that Samsung, which makes chips, itself is having trouble securing its own supply. Give us a sense, some perspective on how bad this unprecedented chip shortage is, especially when compared to 1999 when we had a similar issue.
Yes. So during the 1999, we all know that, from our statistics, it's a decline in this market. However, in 2020, during the pandemic, besides automotive, I think in early 2020s, during the pandemic, we can see that there's a strong decline in the automotive sales. However, we can see that because of the pandemic, everywhere being locked down, so there's a need for a lot of networking devices and also a laptop, notebook, and also tablet and so forth. So that surges the demand for a lot of semiconductors. Towards the end of 2020, we can see a very upsurge of demand of automotives. Cars are demanded, and also, as we can see that for the new cars, all those features, ADAS, and also electrification, all those features demanded more semiconductors. That's a major reason why it's causing this very strong shortage at this period.
So the question is, where do we go from here? We know that the focus now falls on Taiwan, with TSMC pretty much producing half of the world's supply. But there is a limit to how much Taiwan can help the likes of the U.S. and Germany, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So actually, recently, we also attended some conferences between Taiwan and the U.S. discussing this supply chain issue. For the semiconductor, I think the major issue is that the lead time is so long and the capital investment is tremendous. Okay, so it takes time to recover or to fulfill this surging needs. But in reality, when we talk about the semiconductor supply chain, it's not only we talk about the IC chip production. So in terms of wafer production, in other words, it's also assembly and also material that involves in the assembly process. Okay, so everything else, coming around the supply chain and coming around all the world. So that's overall impacting this situation. So for the short term, we cannot see a very easy way to resolve this shortage issue. And we certainly in 2019, we certainly did not expect this kind of we can say responsibility falls into the shoulder of Taiwan, but we will try. Actually, the government and all the companies we know trying very hard. For example, TSMC and ourselves expanding our capacity to fulfill the needs.
Gabriel, how did we arrive at this state of affairs? And it's not all chips where there's a shortage. Where's the worst, and where is there adequate and ample supply?
Okay, as far as I understand. If we look at our current statistics, the logic growth rate for the coming year forecast 11.1%, and the sensor at 10.7%, and also memory at 10.4%. So if you ask my opinion, we will see that because of this very strong demand coming from, for example, automotive and the networking, that will be the most severe shortage area. So we talk about the logic, the sensors, and the memory.
So very, very quickly, Gabriel, we haven't got much time. You say lead times are increasing. That means people will order more, so they'll go from feast to famine. And is that a worry for you?
Exactly. That's a worry, I think, not only for us, but for everybody. And this long lead time, mainly, as I mentioned, coming from the material coming from everywhere. We talk about metals. We talk about epoxy material like a plastic, this oil-based epoxy materials, and also the wafers and all the rare soil, and also a lot of things that are composite into the ICs. So this is a really long supply chain in terms of a semiconductor. So that's worrying to many, many people. I think that all the suppliers and also all the buyers in the world now all in panic. And I think everybody is trying their every effort to resolve these kind of issues.
All right. So as you can see, clearly the role of Taiwan it is quite significant. And our relationship, obviously, first and foremost, the economic bilateral relationship between Taiwan and the United States is the key that will create an opportunity for the U.S. Virgin Islands as a territory in terms of in this region, right, within the Caribbean Americas region. How could we position the U.S. Virgin Islands to emerge as a player, if you will, in that ecosystem as it relates to technology and developing a technology, if you will, industry within the United States Virgin Islands? I want to kind of real quick, because we're running out of time, I want to share that today, is scheduled to be printed today. The Virgin Islands Consortium will be publishing my second article that speaks to the U.S.-Taiwan education exchange value proposition and what does that mean specifically for the U.S. Virgin Islands. But let me just give you a quick couple of excerpts from the article, okay? But you can read it for yourself when it's printed. In 2019, I led a USVI delegation to Taiwan to include the U.S. Virgin Islands Research and Technology Park, better known as UVI RT Park. I was accompanied by Peter Chapman, CEO of the UVI RT Park, and accompanied by the key members of the UVI Research and Technology Park staff members in Erica Saunier and Sydney Paul as well, where we visited Taipei National Taipei, National Taipei University of Technology, and Taiwanese technology companies, and members of the U.S. Virgin Islands legislature, Senator Novo Francis Jr., Kirk Violet, and former Senator Samuel Sanders visited the National Taiwan Normal University. Now, when you think of Taiwan, right, as we said, Taiwan semiconductor manufacturer, they're the world's largest foundry and go-to producer of chips for Apple, smartphones, artificial intelligence, and high-performance computing. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company chips are used for everything from parking sensors to reducing emissions, and with car makers to include Germany's Volkswagen, Ford, and U.S., Japan's, and Toyota Motors, according to the Bloomberg report. I shared with you that the Congress passed a bill for funding of $250 billion. And clearly, a lot of that is going to go towards, again, research and development. And so when you ask what's in it, it's everything from, you have National Science Foundation would receive $50 billion. You have $40 billion would go to spend to upgrade the nation's research facilities. You have minority serving institutions would also get $10 billion more in research dollars, and an additional $15 billion for up to 200 centers for excellence. You have some $35 billion would be spent to develop technology. Then you have, like, for example, that address climate crisis and position the United States as a global leader in clean energy and technology and energy jobs. You have some $30 billion, according to the Biden plan, additional funding for research and development that spurs innovation and job creation, includes in rural areas. And then you have $1 billion a year for the National Institute for Standard and Technology, would receive $14 billion over an unspecified time. In the article, I speak specifically, when I talked about the Virgin Islands, I said that the Virgin Islands is in a position where the education exchange and value proposition studies in the U.S. in the Taiwan is going to be an opportunity for U.S. Virgin Islands students to be able to go to Taiwan and study. And then obviously, because we're in the tourism space, we'll also have Taiwanese students coming here in the U.S. Virgin Islands to be able to intern in our hospitality tourism space as well. And so I'm not going to go into detail as the article because I want you to read it, but it really goes into details on that as well. What do you say, Michael?
No, I agree. And the more I hear about this, I really think about globalization, right? It's really just at the forefront. There's this popular YouTuber that said, globalization is really showing us that we should look more within instead of looking without. And that's how globalization would really turn into play. We have another continent that's growing very rapidly, which is Africa. We don't know once they hit a certain level what the global economy is going to look like and how we're going to, mix and mingle, such as with things like semiconductors, right? What's going to happen then? So, a question that I have for you is, what would you say would be that one thing that, that one value that we can bring to the semiconductor industry within, the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Well, right now, the issue of in the U.S., right, the shortage of talent pool when it comes to employment of U.S. workers within that industry. We don't produce enough talent within the semiconductor space. So the idea is we are in that development of education exchange is to be able to look at the students from the Virgin Islands that we can send to Taiwan to be able to start to train and educate them so we can start to develop the talent pool to be able to have the labor, the workforce pool to create employment for Virgin Islanders within the semiconductor space. Now, specifically as it relates to the development for technology, Obviously, we've been going there for the past couple of years, looking at smart city technology, and then now semiconductor. Obviously, the chips are in those circuit boards, those smart boards, and we got to look at where there's an opportunity for us to be able to position the Virgin Islands to have some part of that supply chain that we're able to made in the USA in our partnership with Taiwan to be able to manufacture any parts of anything to do with smart city technology and this semiconductor chip as well. Obviously, that's a long play because we have to then develop the talent pool, the workforce, to be able to train Virgin Islanders to be able to have, particularly in the area of science and math, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math, right? STEM. We need to start to, the U.S. is not ranking too high in STEM education, and so therefore we have an opportunity to really partner with Taiwan to really strengthen our STEM education offering to the Virgin Islands throughout the United States as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. I really agree with that, and I think it would definitely change the way how we interact, and also supplying the rest of the Caribbean, right? There's other small manufacturing companies across the Caribbean that would definitely take advantage of that.
Right. What this does is it helps to it really establish ourselves as real players within the tech space, whether it's hardware technology or software, right? Or the fact is that we can become a leader because of our partnership to be able to provide support to the rest of the region in a number of different capacities that we can develop. So this is really just to help to start training Virgin Islanders education-wise, giving them the skill sets that they need to be able to start attracting industries to come to Virgin Islands, because now we have the talent pool. So industry is going to want to come. We can start creating offshoots of businesses. And then, of course, obviously, we become a hub, a leader in this region as a U.S. Territory within the Caribbean region.
You're on target, man. I really hope to see that happen soon.
Yes, and so the pandemic has really set us back. As you know, we were on track to open up a U.S. Virgin Islands Trade and Investment Office in Taiwan. That would have been our Asian Pacific office, representing the opportunity to do business in the Virgin Islands. But obviously, the pandemic kind of changed that trajectory. But we were really on track in terms of setting up that U.S. Virgin Islands Trade and Investment Office in Taiwan to be able to not only develop the Taiwan market, but also in the Asian Pacific region as well. So hopefully we can get back on track with, trying to navigate in this pandemic, but obviously we got to work it out. So, all right. All right. So let me say thank you so much for being part of the program, and we'll talk next week. All right.
Yep, man. This was great. Take care.
Okay. All right, man.